Now, I'll chat a little bit firstly about the use of note-taking and whatnot. So I think I mentioned last week that in Amherst it became a thing, like capital A, capital T thing, you know, about this writing. And I'm not saying that because you're writing, because remember what, you know, Jenny and Zara and I talked about it, and did we want to make it a thing? And we don't, because we you know, this is an adult learning environment, and I hadn't said anything anyway. So you didn't fulfill that criterion for when wouldn't be the best time to write. So I'm not no way having a go. So, and have you all experienced that, you know, sometimes taking notes, it does mean that you are in the moment reducing what somebody's saying. Having said that, sometimes for me taking notes is really important when people are talking, which is why we're not making a thing about it. What we do really encourage, rather than prohibit one thing, is encourage another thing, is that when you go home, do set aside some time to reflect on what we've done during the day and write down stuff, or draw stuff, or make a mind map, or a picture, or a poem, or whatever it is. Just a little bit. It might be, you know, while you're commuting home, if it's public transport. Don't do it if you're driving, because that would be irresponsible. And it might be, you know, you might just take time before you scurry off from here at 4:30. I think one of the programs, we actually were quite disciplined for a while, and after sort of at points during the day, we'd actually give you self-reflection time to chronicle. And we can do that. If you find it difficult to find, you know, when you go home and you just go, yeah, and, you know, the dog jumps on you and the family jump on you and real life jumps on you, then we can make time during the thing, or, you know, in the break time. So that just becomes a bit of a point. Because there's a lot to be said for this self-reflection stuff. I had to listen to a presentation on Saturday from another aspect of my life, that where the person was pulling out some of the key findings of current learning theory that comes out of the education system. And one of the big things was contemplation. This was funny because it was, you know, contemplation isn't a word that you would say comes out of the education system, is it really? But it was. They, you know, that was the joke. It was like, and guess what? Even the educationalists are into contemplation because it's so important for learning. And it's about sorting. And you could say, you know, your dreams, you know, which are incredibly psychotic, are a psychotic version of contemplation in a way. Your brain's kind of sifting through stuff. And so, you know, sleep is important. So there's this subconscious contemplation, which we know is really vital for learning and for memory. And there's also this really explicit contemplation where you just take some time out to record. Feldenkrais's big thing about that was to do that, to trust your memory, so that instead of sort of panicking going, oh, Susan said an absolute gem, I've got to write it down right now, because you don't trust your memory, which is mostly our motivation, you see if you can hold on to the flavor of it and remember it in other ways, sort of embody it, and then put it into language at the end of the day. So that's just the one thing about note-taking. To help that, we take relatively detailed notes. When I say we, I obviously have my map, which is in my book here, which has lots of, it looks a bit like that actually, lots of arrows, and, you know, because I change my mind and we do something in different orders and blah, blah, blah. So I wouldn't want to give you this map, but I do type this out quite neatly at some point and give it to Jenny, which is a one-pager summary. And then the assistant trainer has the job of keeping a synopsis, which is a more detailed summary, not full on, not word for word, but a little bit more detail. And for our interest in education and charting, the new thing in this program is that we're trying to map some of those competencies against what we've done during the day, which Zoran said when he sent the copy around on the weekend. It was fun. And he said, you know, it was rabbit ears fun. And I forgot to ask him how cynical he was when he said that anyway. So we have that synopsis. And does that synopsis go officially to everybody, Jenny? I shouldn't ask. Yeah. So you'll get that. People have been asking me about accessing it. Now, the short answer is I haven't tidied it up. So Zoran's done the thing, and then I go and read it and tidy it up, and I haven't done it yet. And I'm not that keen on you having a draft of something that I'm not satisfied with. Call me a control freak and or a perfectionist. I have been both in a past life. So it'll come, right? If you're desperate for some roadmap now, whoever asked me just then, I mean, maybe if I get my butt into gear, the one pager from last week could appear. But what we don't want is sort of bitsy stuff. You know, because you're a group, we like to sort of do things en masse, if you like. So we'll just play it by ear a bit. Jen, do you have any comments about that? Having not warned you that I was going to say that.
Yeah, so what will happen at the end of the segment is that into the knowledge base will go all the videos and the audio recordings of the ATMs and the synopsis and any kind of notes or, you know, the instructions for the online part of the segment. So that's the kind of reference filing cabinet where you can go and find stuff. And I kind of like to think of the time together as being when you can just immerse yourself and experience it. And then you can go back and look in the filing cabinet and think about, well, what did we actually do? And that might be when you bring more of the thinking and reflecting. And, you know, certainly the daily contemplation of the experience is great to capture, but to go back and think more about it later, it's there. You haven't lost it. It's captured forever, mostly.
Forever. It's a long time. Yeah. Now, the other thing that we are doing to help with the self-reflection on a day-to-day basis is key things we'll just quietly go and put on the whiteboard. We're not going to put the whole detail on there. It's just joggers. Now, what's on there at the moment is something that's somewhat detailed about that exercise that we did, that activity, let's say, that we did prior to lunch. And what is interesting for you to observe when we're doing those sorts of activities is how you use those reminders. Do you use them as a recipe? Like, okay, point A, I'm going to do this. And you do it, tick. Point B, what's that? Crane your eyes, do this. I see you're doing it though. Okay, do number 2. So you start doing the process like it's a serial event. You know, like one thing, then the next, then the next, then the next. However, that's the constraint of a whiteboard, right? That we have to write one thing after another. The reality is it is very recursive, and the observation doesn't stop, you know, while you're doing the feedback down the bottom. Just because observation's up the top and feedback's down the bottom doesn't mean that, you know, one's at the beginning and one's at the end. These things are all cyclic and interrelated, and, you know, you can start to see you can see it from the arrows, just a little bit even, how things connect to each other. So I invite you to observe how you look at those things, and you're welcome to, you know, just pop them in your notebook, in your chronicle, and they might trigger some self-reflections later in the day. Other times we'll just put up what we think are really key words, what we're calling the lexicon, meaning, you know, our little personal dictionary, you know. And again, we would invite you to add to those words the definitions, and not a linguistic definition. Like you can Google equipoise, what the literal meaning is. You can also reflect on what your embodied definition of it is. Like, what did you experience today that felt like equipoise? You know, and classically might be that point where you find your side and you're neither forward nor backward. You're not nowhere. You're somewhere equipoised. You know, you're neither flexed nor extended, neither forward, neither back, neither up, neither down, kind of thing. A bit like Christopher Robin. Halfway up the stairs, halfway down the stairs, equipoise, that kind of thing. So have a think about that. You know, some of you might get your crayons out if you feel really uncomfortable with written language. You just get your crayons out. Jenny's got to say something.
Yeah, I really encourage you to get your crayons or your texters or whatever, because one of the things that I find about Chronicles is it's really hard to find anything if it's all in the same pen and without kind of headings or markers or illustrations of the profound points or markers, so that you can, if we say, you know, now a year later, go back and look at your reaction to this and compare it with where you're at now, being able to find things will be helpful.
Yeah.
So put some signposts in your chronicle.
You might even get the glue stick and the sparkly things out. And some stickers and whatever you like. Oh, not that artist guy in London used to put elephant's poo all over his artwork. Can you not use poo? Just think there's a limit. Don't use excrement unless you have to. And we don't want to see it anyway. I was going to rein in my brain this week, but clearly hasn't worked. All right, so I think that's all we need to say about recording. Oh, the other thing, contemplate this, that these chronicles that we don't see, they're your personal thing. However, when we invite you to think about, contemplate so let's say the competence, the first one, which I'm quite keen on, you know, to bandy around this week, which is about what are the aims of the method? You know, what's the aims? Then you can start looking through your chronicle to find out for you, what have you recorded in there? What are the hints in there that you could find out, you know, the aims that you've experienced, so you know them really well. And you use them to start forming the basis of how you're going to articulate that, how you're going to start playing with that first competence of that I know and can communicate the aims of this work, because it will be in there in some shape or form, that, you know, for you. And then somehow or other, you know, that's that invitation to you, is eventually, and I'll keep sowing these little seeds, when we share the aims, then you're going to come up with a really rich knowledge, body of knowledge, literally, around what the aims of this might be, that all of you have experienced when we put it together. So that, you know, that first competence is that we could pop you into any situation and you could articulate the aims of the method for whatever audience and whatever environment you're in. You know, whether it's you waiting for the bus and, you know, there's a father and a little child in a pusher, and you could articulate in a way that they can digest. You know, you got let's say you got Feldenkrais method on your t-shirt, and they, you know, and he says, what is that for? The little kid says, Felden what? Which is classic. You could articulate it in that situation just as easily as if the professor of philosophy from Melbourne University saw your t-shirt and said, what's the point of that? What's that about? Or someone who didn't have any language at all, and you could put your hands on them and show them. I'm being a bit slightly fanciful there, but it's true. Sometimes that's what we do. You know, you can't use language to it. Larry gets people to do it. Maybe we'll do that here too. Larry gets people to do a great little exercise at the sort of the elevator, the elevator conversation. Is you know, you're standing in an elevator, you've basically got 20 seconds, and someone looks at your t-shirt and says, what's that Feldenkrais business? What do you say? Or the 2-minute party conversation, or he calls them the 5-minute miracles, so that you're sitting next to somebody at a dinner party and they say, well, what's that all about? Instead of giving them words, you give them a little 5-minute ATM. So just to give you some ideas about that first competence, which sort of sounds a bit dry, what's the aims of the method, actually becomes a very rich thing. Okay, now, you're going to go to sleep if I keep talking? Ask it. Yes. Yep. Here comes the box. It's going to be bounced in, and it might. Reminds me of that movie, The Dam Busters. It used to be on every other Saturday afternoon when I was a kid. Is that a shared experience in the room?
So,
Google it.
So you were talking about being able to talk about what the aims are as a first competency, and something occurred to me, and it's not. I'm not up to the stage of being able to communicate it to different audiences. But I just thought of we were talking about reversibility. There's been a theme of reversibility, and as being an example of Feldenkrais's aim of flexible minds.
Yeah. Yep. That's right. Yep. That's perfect.
Oh, hello.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise you couldn't hear. It's the
Reversibility as being an example of Feldenkrais's aim of, there's a saying, what I'm after is not flexible bodies, but flexible minds.
And reversibility is an embodied manifestation of that. Absolutely. Yeah. So you can see how this competence is emerging, whether you know it or not. Because, how do you judge whether you're competent or not? You feel about, do you go immediately to the places where you don't feel competent? Where you can't explain the aim? Or do we start building on when I do feel competent? Like I can explain it to my dog, but I can't explain it to my partner yet. Did you have a point? Yeah. Because you just have a little smelly thing in your pocket like food, and then they'll listen beautifully.
I think I'm having flashbacks to being a stressful 8-year-old or something, in terms of writing notes and prescribing meaning to what we've been experiencing in the past. And just want to acknowledge that. That I might not actually put anything that meaningful down. Well,
you're judging that it's not meaningful.
A little bit, or in terms of just like, what are you going to write about what we just did? I don't know. I kind of get that little kid response. And is it really important to acknowledge these things, because some people writing stuff down is their dummy. That's what they'll go and suck on straight away to feel comfortable, right? And for you, it's the opposite. It's, and so in this room, that's a great thing to acknowledge, this spectrum, and you'll all lie somewhere on that spectrum unless you've created your own spectra. So that's why we're trying not to be prescriptive. And if you don't want to put it in words, get your crayons out. If you don't want to get your crayons out, have a little, I don't know, do a little performance art in the back corner or something. And you go home. What I was almost explaining to myself then was that all the exercise we're doing, when we're doing this, when we're doing exercise like this, I'm not thinking in words. Exactly.
Yes. And that's why he didn't want people to write.
Or playing or just noticing, observing. Exactly. Exactly. Yes. He didn't want, that's exactly why he didn't want people to write. Takes the play out of it. Exactly. Yeah. However, some people who like playing with words, like I quite like playing with words. I can't help it. So this is where we have to have very big flexible minds as Feldenkrais teachers to know that there's all this diversity in the room, and that what is absolutely delicious for one person is to another person's close on toxic, So, and that's marvelous, actually, to keep remembering that. And then the interesting thing for us is, can I play a little bit around being more like you? So let's say, Angela loves, I'm not saying you really do, but let's say for her, writing is her refuge, it's her comfort. That's what she does first to make herself feel, And for you, it's the last thing you would do, makes you feel, ugh. So the two of you, can you, in a way, swap coats and try Angela's coat on, and you try Lockie's coat on, and to see what it's like. What's it like to not do that? I'm picking on both of you. It's not necessarily true, but that's the play. That's the play in here. Because there might come in moments of contemplation where somebody go, it's not at times where I think I'm supposed to be writing something down. I'm supposed to be explaining something. We have to be a bit flexible. I'm not going to smack you if you go and write something down in the middle of an ATM.
That's what we're saying. We're not making a thing in here. There's a kind of a loose principle, but like any principle, it's not a law. It's just the guiding principle. Richard.
That conversation just reminded me of something that has always interested me. Was what happens when people are thinking? Because I've always been really aware that myself, when I'm thinking, it's typically
up a little bit for the people behind you.
I hear words.
When you're thinking, yeah.
I hear words.
Yeah.
And it's often in a future sense, like there's a conversation in the future and a little dialogue that goes on in my brain. But like, you know, when you become close to people, you ask them, I would ask them, I'd say, well, what happens when you're thinking? What goes on in your brain? And some people would see a still image, and some people would see a moving image, and some people would see a moving image and with sound. And I was always really envious of those ones who had the moving image with sound. But I thought it tied into that thing about what you're talking about, that anxiety about wanting to write words or not, and swapping into other people's way of being. Because I think you can learn the different modes as well.
Yeah. It might not ever be your first preference. You just try it. It's a bit like, you know, I've already hinted I don't like carrots. Well, it's not like I haven't tried them. You know, I've tried them in many different ways. I just don't like them. That's okay, but I've given it a crack many times, believe me, many times. So if writing never is your favourite thing, that's absolutely fine, but you know you've given it a crack. And it's not some old, deep-seated, habitual avoidance because somebody smacked you when you wrote something wrong the first time you did it. You know, it's that kind of thing. Yeah, and you're probably thinking like crazy, you know, and feeling and sensing. Exactly. So there is here. Firstly, you can take yourself off the peg and say there is no right thing because we're not checking it. And if you decide it's the wrong thing, well, more for you, really. You know, do you know what I mean? Like then you go, oh, that's really funny. It's me that's judging me. It's not the teacher. I've become the teacher. That's really interesting. Angela,
I had I experimented last week and had a day or so of not taking notes and just thought, oh, maybe I'll do it when I get home.
Yeah.
But my experiences was like I was kind of overwhelmed. I got home and I was completely overwhelmed and of course I couldn't remember half of what we had done from the start of the day. Yeah. So I think maybe what I will try next is maybe during the break or lunchtime. Yeah. Because it's easier for me to reflect on like that, what we did before lunch and what that experience was like. And then rather than thinking of it as notes so I can remember what we did, but kind of capture my impression of the experience from that. Exercise.
Yeah, that's great. And you can write about it from different points. You can write what you sensed. So it could just be a series of sensing words or pictures or whatever, or it could be the thoughts, it could be the feelings, it could be the actual action. You know, like the synopsis is more the action because we're not going to write down what sensing, thinking, feeling is because we don't know what you're sensing, thinking and feeling. The synopsis is biased towards the doing of those four. But then you can look back on these chronicles and see, how do I mostly language? I mostly language my thoughts. I very rarely language my feelings or my sensing. None of it's right or wrong. It's just your tendency, you know, your preference, your habit. Gloria.
When I looked back at last week's reflections that I did, I don't know, I could be wrong, but...
Oh, yes, I'm sure you are.
I had the distinct impression that like all of mine were reflections of my childhood. Of from when I was born, obviously.
It worked, Jen. No, it's not true. It's not true. It doesn't matter.
Obviously the sucking one, you know, from birth, you know, and maybe that put me in the frame, I don't know, but it sort of seemed to go from there up to about grade 7 for me. Yeah. And so when I wrote things down, they were things about linking back to childhood experiences that I then wanted to then remember and reflect on later. Yeah. They weren't actually what you said at all. Or what anybody said. They weren't actually, you know, notes about that. It was just about what was occurring to me or what I was sensing. You know.
Yeah, great.
But it was all related back to that. I don't know if that was the thing.
It's not the
last
intent
week, but
necessarily. It's what bubbles up for you.
yeah, that's what did it. Yeah.
You know, when I think I mentioned last week, I had my classic questing phase in my 20s where I tried every bloody weirdo thing under the sun that was around back then. And all the stuff that was sort of regressive and going back to the childhood. Can you just turn upside down? Sorry, I'm just ringing my own ear. Was completely useless on me because I actually had a really happy childhood. I remember, you know, doing this rebirthing thing where you have to breathe in a certain way and you're meant to go through. And I did it with a friend of mine and she was like distraught and all these memories bubbled up. And I just lay there laughing and the woman got really pissed off with me because she thought I was laughing at the process. I wasn't. I was just laughing because I was happy because that was my childhood. So there's almost nothing that happens to me that catapults me into my childhood memories because it's not like nothing happened, but nothing stands out. You know, there's a few little things. Yeah, you know, that bubble up like when I realised I bullied Karina Bickley. That's okay. We've all found our little local bully. That was a really horrible thing. But, you know, apart from that, nothing bubbles up for me from my childhood. But if it bubbles up for you, it doesn't mean that it was wrong or anything else. It's just your process. It's not.
I think it was more me as a learner. Those early learning experiences.
So similar to what Lockie was saying.
Yeah, coming back to how I did that then.
Yeah.
And probably last week was sort of like in that early learning phase and sort of, so it was the parallels. Yeah. The parallels to that early childhood. Yeah. Not saying whether it was a good childhood or bad childhood, but it was just the parallels of learning.
Yeah. Well, it might not be tucked away for any reason. It's not, you know, relevant at the moment. You know, and I say that's not our intention to have people regress necessarily, but of course it is partly. But not to regress in a therapeutic sense, to use our prior learnings and foreground them again, just to bring them out, to examine them. They were useful then. And, you know, the metaphor is sort of where I'm wanting to head with this talk is starting with sucking, which is, you know, apart from breathing, one of our first really purposeful acts in the world, which is partly reflexive, you know, partly innate, I mean. It's not that we want you to go back and suck everything. It's more to say that the sucking kind of develop. If you'd stayed sucking with that rooting kind of reflex with this, then nobody could touch your mouth, and every time someone touched your mouth, touched your cheek, you'd turn your head. That's not going to serve you well in life now. So you learn, because our brains are so plastic, that that's not a necessary thing all the time. And yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, you learn to suck in different ways, and the sucking of a breast is very different to sucking of a bottle, and very different to sucking of a straw. Now, I work with kids who still try and suck with their tongue like it's a breast when it's a straw or something. Or they get this, or as soon as something touches their mouth, and they'll get a tongue thrust, and they could die of it because it pushes the food out, right? So there's a metaphor around sucking that you do the best that you can under those circumstances. And under those circumstances, you suck like this because that's the best way to get milk out of a breast. Then you learn to adapt it to getting milk out of a bottle or whatever it is. Then you learn to adapt it to not doing any of that business with the tongue, but actually when you're swallowing, when you're drinking, the tongue just, you know, forms a little bowl, if you like. It's completely different. So you can see how these previous functions are modified and adapted through a learning process as circumstances, as the task starts to change and then the environment starts to change. So we don't lose it. And that was my point this morning, is that when we talk about change, it's not about saying, oh, that sucking reflex is wrong, get rid of it. It's about, that doesn't serve me as well as a different set of strategies now. So we start, and we can take some of the strategies from that early sucking, you know, like having nice soft lips and a jaw that can come forward. And we use some of those components and we reconfigure them, if you like. We repurpose them, we recycle them into other patterns that serve us better under the new circumstances. So when we talk about change, that's kind of what we're doing. So we're not saying get rid of stuff necessarily, or change because you're bad or because it's wrong. It's just there's something else that might serve you better. So when you do go back and reflect on, now at the time that, you know, not writing was a decision, you know, Lockie made that served you however it did back then, it still might not serve you well now. So you just take it out, reconsider it, see what you can take from that skill. Is it different now? Is it the same? And if it's sort of the same, you put it back. If it's not, then you modify, or you might take some of it, you know, not write words, but draw flowers, or, you know, draw big pictures of tongues or whatever you like, sort of thing. So, you know, we struggle with this change thing a lot. I think I mentioned also last week, part of my role at uni is we do a lot of health service evaluation and a lot of implementation work. So, you know, we've done our clinical trials. We know what best practice is, more or less. But, you know, and then our job is to work with clinicians to use this new learning. It's really hard to get people to change because they think they have to, that there is this inherent, what we're doing was, you're telling us what we're doing was wrong, and we have to change and kind of put the brake on, stop, do something completely different. What I'm trying to help people with is use more of this Feldenkrais mentality around change. I mean, there's lots of theories of behaviour of change and ways of analysing and all this sort of stuff. But can you start to get the sense on the floor that we're introducing a way of change that's a little bit more organic and a little bit more palatable and a little easier to swallow, and it's a little bit closer to the way our nervous system works, is that we don't want to create a whole new pattern. We want to look at the old pattern and then compare something that's similar and different so that we broaden. So instead of having one pattern, we've got two patterns. And then we've got a choice, and then we've got three patterns, and then we've got four patterns. Is that kind of clear? Yeah, Lockie needs the box. Oh, did you want to say something, Lauren?
I was just going to, on that line of organic process.
Yeah.
And it's really, really like hits home for me. But when it comes to describing and trying to like quantify something and putting it into like communication to another person, I find like, particularly with me, I flounce around a lot. If I exercise describing, I'm kind of just like bored of the edge and just keep coming in and out. I can do it forever, but I can never really like just give like a short statement on like, so what are you doing? Like, you know, that Feldenkrais thing. And it's like, I really got to hone in my energy and just try and like, you know, and I always find myself, in these funny situations, just trying to think of describing it. And I've actually adopted what my girlfriend said. It was like, oh yeah, it's kind of like a mix between yoga and physiotherapy.
Yeah, look, you know, for some people that works. It's the first approximation.
I thought it was really genius, but it's just because it's so hard to describe an organic process. And now being here particularly, and my evaluation's not stable one little bit.
No.
But this is completely, and I didn't think I was holding many expectations, but this is completely not what I was even like not expecting in that. Like, just, you know, being open to it, and it's even more seeming like tending to that organic process even more. So it's a bit of an irony in that.
Yeah.
So I'll go straight for the crayons.
Yeah. So that, you know, describing the method, you know, everybody always laughs when you say that it's really hard, because it's not easy even now for me, and I've been doing this since, you know, our training started in 89. Frank's first phase, and when I first was introduced to method, was 84. So it's not like it gets easy. Do I feel competent? Yeah, most of the time, but not all of the time. And sometimes I do actually do that. It's a bit between yoga and physio, which is why I really laughed when you said it. I don't actually say physio because it's a bit loaded for me, because that's my past life. But I do use something, because, and it's a very intelligent thing to do, because it's anchoring it to something that they know. Because if you start going off in Feldy babble, what we call Feldy babble, you lose them. Their eyes glaze over and the opportunity's gone. You know, it's just, it's such a, Yeah. So Lockie and then Kevin. Yeah. It's not the Antichrist, it's Feldenkrais. Yes. So
that organic process is something that really intrigues me, and how to, and I want to ask you around I guess when we encounter trauma in the body and we get that freeze response.
Yeah.
Like I was just thinking that was kind of what happens when I get pressured to write when I don't feel like writing. You know, there's a bit of a freeze response.
Yeah.
But I guess, what's your take on trauma and the freeze response?
The freeze response, you know, it sounds really Pollyanna, but last week, remember I talked about, can we start reframing this word mistake? The freeze response is one of those that we'll interpret. It's kind of our body's way of saying, oh, no, mistake, don't go there, or something like this. It's going to be too hard. I'm going to make a mistake. It's almost, you know, that kind of thing.
I just read a book on trauma, and it described it as basically the fight and flight response happening at the same time. So you're basically trying to...
Immobilized. Yeah, you can see it that way. Anxiety is incredibly immobilizing. And you could say, you know, trauma does it. It can do it. Pain does it. And then that response in itself becomes painful and traumatic. And that's what we're really good at, you know, kind of working with, is the embodied experience of that trauma or that pain or whatever it is. We start working with it really gently through curiosity, and not with this idea that, oh, it's a failure, or it's a damage, or it's a pathology. It's part of you. And can we be curious about it? And it's just as much a part of you as your curly hair is. And I'm sorry if your curly hair is a trauma to you. Again, I just pick on it because my son's got really curly hair. And anyway, it just makes me do it. So we have the same. You know, look, if I go back to this example here, you put your hand on the bit that felt easiest first, right? And you were curious about what goes easiest. Now, you could say in the metaphor that the bit that moved the least, maybe that's the trauma bit, let's say. You know, it's an ugly way of putting it. So we don't go first on it there, but our approach to both bits, the not traumatized and the traumatized, if we can be that inaccurate in language, is exactly the same. Now, that's really hard to do. But if we have that as practitioners, that both are really interesting. Like, I'm really curious, why is this one so easy and why is this one holding? And I'm not going, why is this one so good and this one so bad? Well, that's the trick.
That's the differentiation, isn't it?
Yeah.
So when you get someone who's in a freeze response, it's nice to be able to show them what not freeze is like, as well as
that's right.
And going back.
And we will probably do something even more, if it was safe, and this is where you do get more and more skill, is how do you move in and out of that response? So maybe you actually move into it a little bit more. Now, that's revolutionary. You know, the Feldenkrais, I'd never come across that kind of idea. But this is your pattern. So let's get really clear about what this pattern is. Do you know that when you go into that response, did you realize that not only that you do get it here, but then, you know, this happens and then this happens, and you do it in this very curious, gentle way. And then you really get clear, what's my response to this, so that you know it even better.
Yeah,
as opposed
that's
to
like the psychotherapy version of it, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's and we do it so gently, hopefully, when we get it right. It's so gentle because it's just curiosity and there's no judgment, because we would have exactly the same frame of mind as if we were exploring, you know, the most elegant free movement as well, or state of being. You know, the movement is just a reflection of the state of being, right? So you know, there's a lot of principles that we could talk about in the way we tackle it, but I think that's just a good enough answer. Yeah, good, excellent. Kevin, you've forgotten? See how you have to, this is memory training and delayed gratification. It's a high cognitive skill, delaying gratification.
I was going to say, it was actually really sort of more picking up on your point, but basically I walked down to go and grab a coffee last week. I think it was Tuesday, Wednesday last week, and sitting at the table having coffee, the guy that sat down next to me was a bus driver and said, right, so what are you here for then? So I said, Feldenkrais. He went, Felden what?
Yeah.
Logically. Tried to explain it to him in as coherent sort of fashion as I could, and he sort of paused, took a sip of his coffee and went, hippie shit then.
Yeah.
So if that gives any context, then that was my first experience.
Yeah. So there, Kevin, my friend, is a very rich learning opportunity. That's what we're about. Yes, Anna.
Actually, just last week when I kind of some exercise we were doing, I think it was with my green group. We all actually said to each other, "What do you say to people when?" And we all had different things we said, and it all depended on who you were talking to.
Exactly.
As well. So
exactly.
I don't think I can't tick off that first learning criteria yet.
Not yet.
But that's like I'm comfortable with being a slow learner.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah.
I'm just, this just is popping into my head. I don't know how relevant it is to the whole conversation. I'm just going to say it anyway.
Say it.
A while ago, this is before Feldenkrais even came into my consciousness, someone said to me, a therapist said, learn how to juggle because it will help you sort of keep all the balls in the air and blah, 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 metaphor sort of. And I ignored her because it was too hard and I didn't think I could. But then later on television, that nice, handsome Todd Sanson did that show where he learned how to juggle. And I thought, okay, I'm going to learn how to juggle. And I did. I've learned how to juggle, and it took me like probably 20 times longer than it takes anybody else. But I learned it, and I had such an image. I've never known how to juggle, and then I now can juggle really smoothly. Yeah. And I'm really interested in coming here, and I don't know if this is an aim or how it all fits in, or even if it does, of just that. And I do feel there's a little bit of many turning points learning how to juggle and this thing that I can.
Your self-image expanded.
Yeah, and so I'm very curious how doing something with your body can then go float out into
absolutely.
Your life in general.
He's getting a bit getting a bit testosterone for me, but anyway. So it does. It has to flow out. Yeah. The short answer is, if it doesn't flow out into the rest of your life, then there is no integration, and it's very situational learning. It only happens here on the mat, and it doesn't influence the way you run across the road to catch the bus, or the way you view yourself. Then it hasn't worked. No, I've never met anybody that hasn't. They might not have recognised it or not, but it's that, you know, you had a self-image that somehow there was a part of you that couldn't. Oh, I can't juggle. Like I can't express myself in words, or there's some little voice that's in your self-image that says, "No, I can't do that. That's not me." They're really good at that. They're really flexible, or you know, they've got really long legs. I can do it, or you know, or I'm not creative. You know, all these little I can't sing. You know, we've all got these little I can't, little labels, little critics. You know, and sometimes it. You didn't hear up the back. Gloria said, sometimes it's true. So you take out those little things and you give them a little test run and you see, is it really true? Yep. And then you put them back, you know, and if they're not relevant anymore, and you find, oh, you know, if your self-image was, oh, I'm a bit unco, and then all of a sudden you can juggle, there's evidence of your competence, right? Exactly what we're talking about Friday. You now have evidence of your competence. So when that little critic says, oh, I'm so clumsy, or whatever your little thingy was, I'm an unco, or whatever the label was, you now go, shut up, because I can juggle. Like, I'm competent. Here's my evidence. You know, it's really, so that's what we're about here. And for people who do feel unco, to have a moment where you feel graceful on the floor doing an ATM, like, yes, that's the version of juggling. Yeah. Sorry, Anna first.
I was going to say, I'm kind of getting a feeling, that's feeling it.
Yeah.
Is it almost like like the whole method, there's no prescriptive way of doing it, hence no prescriptive way of describing it. It's almost like it depends on you as an individual and who you're talking to about it, your experience and theirs, how you describe it, because it's got to be tailored and you're speaking from your own personal experience. Because I've found that when I've actually said the benefits more I've had from doing Feldy, I can't really explain why, but hey, wow, I did this and this is different. And someone's been enrolled, they want to try and do it just because, like when I said it from that point of view, rather than when I try and explain all the different reasons why it might work and stuff, it tends to lose people a bit more. Anyway, it was just,
And the word benefit we were talking about yesterday when we were discussing this, and I was arguing fairly strongly that sometimes we can't language this in terms of aims. We have to language it in terms of benefits. And that benefit sometimes has to be really concrete, like my back feels better.
Yeah, well, like,
that's really reductionist.
Yeah.
And if that was your only answer to explain the aim of, can you turn the thing upside down while I'm talking? Sorry. It's just, it echoes in I get a feedback thing. I don't know, do you hear it as well? Or is it just me? If that's the only way that you can describe it to somebody, that it makes my back feel better, not a particularly rich, competent thing. If you've got a lot of variety in that, that you can match some of your embodied experiences to something that people can hear, remember, because it's a two-way thing. It's what, I'm just going to draw a line under this conversation about what the method is, because Jenny's got a little exercise to do tomorrow with you that's really going to help with this. Not help, maybe it won't, might hinder. You never know, because Jenny's humble. She's no expectations, or maybe she has. Because we're going to keep coming back to this and keep having practice, keep sharing ideas about how you tackle this. It's one of the elusive obvious. Feldenkrais, you do it and it's so bloody obvious. How do you language it? It's so elusive. So firstly, we acknowledge that. And then part of this, why we've dragged that competence up and put it right on the top, is because of that. So we will keep returning to it. You keep getting practice at it. You'll keep making spectacular boo-boos, a la Kevin, which is not a boo-boo. It's just how, isn't it? I'm teasing you to say it's a boo-boo. It's not. It's feedback. You go, okay, well, I tried it that way. Because it's interesting that you said bus driver, because Larry's, fighting Larry again. Anyway, Buddy's going to get such a fat head if he wouldn't. That's one of his examples of how he learned to describe the method, because he worked with bus drivers. So he uses that as a thing a lot. So that's his thing, is that he would, bus drivers, they have to turn big, heavy wheels. But they do it like this. And they think, so he'll sort of ask them, how do you turn your wheel? And they'll go like this. Yeah. So, Larry's whole story, though, is to illustrate how you immediately do what you're talking about, Anna, which is what a bus drivers maybe relate to. Turning wheels might be something. And so then that's when you might do, because they're very physical kind of, let's say, is say, well, if I work with bus drivers, I would show them how to find more efficient ways of driving, and give them a little mini ATM about, it was like one of the turning ATMs would work with them, because they do this and their pelvises are still. As soon as you show someone how to turn your pelvis, driving is a piece of cake. So that's that, okay? Right, so, Feldenkrais, can be difficult to describe. If we keep labelling it as difficult, though, it just stays difficult. So we're going to try and not go there, and practice making it easy. So, the impossible, easy, the easy, elegant. Sorry? Language is fast. We want you to explore the full thing of it. What did you do on the weekend, Julie? Did you draw, join Australian Idol or something?
I did not.
Get a bit of vocal abuse in.
I'm afraid
Mosh
not.
pit, was it?
I think it was just the ATM coming out at the end of the week. Something like that. But you look at 8 notes in an octave, or 26 letters to make all our words. It's got 7 hues, 7 colours that you combine to make how many images. I don't think, honestly, that it's that hard. No, I wouldn't say it's not hard. I don't think it's impossible to language. That's what I'd say. That we have this, it's just maybe that's one of those delicious tasks. Just like
delicious task. That's what we love.
Just like
perfect, yeah. Julie. It's a delicious task.
Okay, I won't say any more, so you like that.
Yum.
Who's next?
Yum.
You.
All right. Let me go back to what I originally wanted to talk about. Oh, give me a PowerPoint. No, don't give me a PowerPoint. It's just my past life speaking. Change. All right. Quietly lie on your back for a minute or sit in any position. And I'm just going to put words and you're going to